Greetings and welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to step back from my garage projects and my car repair work and try something a little different. I'm going to show you how to take a commercially available veterans display case like this one and turn it into something very unique and out of the ordinary to honor the veteran in your family. We're going to use simple and inexpensive graphics and photo editing software to help turn the display into something a little more than just a rack of awards, ribbons, and badges. By doing so, we hope to better illustrate the military career of the veteran we're honoring by adding a few captioned photographs. A display like this makes a great gift and a wonderful addition to a home office or den. So stay tuned and we will show you how to make one. When I bought this case to display my dad's burial flag, I wasn't really happy with just using the lower portion to hang his various awards, medals, and badges. I'm hoping this display will be kept and passed down through the generations in my family, and I thought it would be more meaningful if the display told a story and gave some context to the background of what my dad's service was all about. The central display in this cabinet is actually a photo document that I generated using CorelDraw and Photo Paint. The version of this software that I'm using is older and it's very inexpensive, but you can use just about any photo editing or graphics program you might have in your computer to do the same kind of work. The principles are very simple and common. Once we have the image generated, I'll show you where I had mine printed on a simulated canvas surface. This gives the image some texture and helps the colors pop with a little more vibrance. To start this project, we do one of the simplest operations you can do with any drawing program, and that is to draw a rectangle. You simply click on the rectangle button at the side of the screen, then right-click on your drawing area where you want to begin the rectangle and expand that out to the size and shape that you want. For my display, I chose 8.5 by 11 inches. Size is optional to a point. Just make sure that you're choosing a common photographic size so that you won't have any trouble printing it. You don't want to have part of the picture cropped off in the printing process. Once we have our rectangle, we need a background color, and since I'm making a display for an Air Force pilot, I'm choosing a nice deep blue. Now for a little dramatic effect, I'm going to select the outline button over at the left and then widen the border to make it more visible. Now since the black itself isn't enough of a contrast over the blue, I chose to change that border color to orange, and that gave me the nice dramatic effect I was looking for. At this point, it's a good idea to name your project and save it to a folder or the desktop. Okay, now it's time to populate that blue rectangle that I just made with some photographs. I'm going to use Photo Paint as my photo editing program, but I'm not really advocating one program over another because these are pretty simple operations. So I'm going to start with a photograph of my father and mother right after he got home from the war. And I'm going to do a little editing of this photograph to enhance it a little bit. First, I want to get rid of some of the noise because it has a lot of little white specks on it. So I'm going to use the remove noise feature. And I like that. That looks pretty good. I'm going to try various settings, but the highest setting seems to get the best result. It's not perfect, but it's going to be printed small on this project anyway. You can also try to sharpen the picture a little bit. We'll see if that does us any good. And that does improve it a little bit. Now if you don't like the older yellowed effect of a photograph, you can always use your program to enhance it a little bit. I can change the temperature of the photograph, meaning making it warmer or cooler with a little slider in Photo Paint. Here I'm turning it just a little bit more blue, if that's the way you prefer. You can even turn it to a completely grayscale, so it's entirely black and white and shades of gray, but I'm kind of happy with it as it is here. It's also important that you make sure that the photograph has the size and the resolution you want. In this case, I go to a setting called Resample, and then I can change its size and alter its resolution to whatever value I want. This is about 1.5 inches wide by 2.5 inches tall. I think I want that to be a little larger than that, so I'm probably gonna, maybe double it or so. I also want it to be as high a resolution as I'd like it to transfer to the other project, so I've got 300 dpi set up. Again, experiment a little bit. You might not need that much resolution. Okay, so here I'm changing it to a little bit more than double what it was originally. And now let's go ahead and try to save it. I'm going to use the export command to send it out as a JPEG bitmap to the desktop. Now, when it's giving me a preview, I notice there's a white border around the picture that I didn't see before. So I want to get rid of that because I don't want it to show up on the blue background with the final project. So I'm going to select a mask tool, a rectangular mask, and then draw a rectangle which excludes those outer areas. Now that I have that rectangle, I can go up to my image settings and hit crop, and then I can crop this to the mask, and that should have cut away all of that unwanted white border. So let's export it again. Export to desktop as a JPEG. And there it is. That's the way I want it to look. I like that, so I'm going to save it as is. Now that I have all my photographs resized and edited with my photo editing program, I've reopened my drawing program and brought up that rectangle that we drew, and it's time to populate it with these photographs. To do that, you click on File and then drop down to the Import command, and then use that to find the file you want to import. Basically just draw a rectangle where you want it to be. We're going to be able to move it around any place we want, so it doesn't matter where it is at the moment. Now each of these photographs can be selected and moved around. In this case I'm using the arrow keys, and I'm going to bump these photographs around in various places until I see a pattern I like. Now on my display I have to leave some space in several locations on this blue rectangle because I have a few objects I'm going to attach in addition to the photographs. I'm going to include his wings and his cap device, which is the gold eagle, along with a piece of flak, which is shrapnel from anti-aircraft artillery. So I'm going to remember that I need some space for those objects in between these photos. After I put my photos in position, I decided I wanted to accent them a little bit, so I'm going to draw a rectangle around each one of them and give them an orange border. That's an optional feature, of course, but I like it. I think it makes a good accent. And don't be afraid to resize the border. You can make the line width anything you'd like. I'm going to try various widths, from too thin to too thick, until I think it's a good effect. Here I just widened it to the same width as the outer border around the entire exterior rectangle. And since I liked it on that first photograph, I'm going to repeat it for all the others. There I draw the rectangle, Then I change the color of the rectangle I drew and widen it, in this case, to 8 points. Looking pretty good at this point. I like the way this is coming out. I want to keep re-emphasizing that none of this is locked in place yet. We can change any of these factors anytime we want to, right up until the final product is produced. My next project was to try to find some way to include the squadron insignia and the bomb group insignia that he would have worn on his flight jacket as patches. Now, he never kept his jacket. I don't know what happened to it. So I didn't have anything to go on, but I could find a couple of examples on the internet. This example here is his squadron insignia, which I already enhanced a little bit using my photo editing program, and so it's ready for inclusion. His bomb group patch, however, was a little fuzzy, and the best copy I could get just really wasn't up to my standards, so I ended up redrawing it completely using my drawing program. Making a drawing like this one is a big enough project in itself, so I'm not going to include the process I went through for this video. I may, however, show how to make a drawing like this at a later date. And if you're curious, that motto in Latin says that a righteous man fears none. In any case, if you want to include something like a squadron patch and you're going to do it from a photograph, the first thing to do is to search the internet to find an example. This is the one I found, and it's in pretty good shape, but I am going to touch it up a little bit. Here I'm using a clone tool to get rid of some of the white spots on the original patch, just to make the blue background look a little more even. Fix a few other spots here and there. Really, I'm just fussing with it. This image is pretty good as is. Now I'm going to adjust the color to brighten it up a little bit by increasing the saturation. That's a common setting on most photo editing programs. I can also brighten the whole thing up a little bit by adjusting what's called a tone curve. Again, just optional. I'm fussing. You don't have to do all of that. And now I'm going to save it. I've already got the item named, and I'm saving it to my desktop. Now, in most ways, an irregularly shaped object like this squadron patch can be imported into the document in the same way that we did the photographs. But as you see here, when we insert it, we are now left with that white background again. Now, there are several ways we can deal with this. We can either just leave it alone and maybe put an orange border around it, and I'm sure it'll look fine the way it is. But if you want that patch to be completely isolated, meaning as if you actually glued the real patch onto this background, we have to get rid of that white border. There are several ways we can try to deal with that with the photo editing program, but to make it simple, I'm going to show you a way that we can use an internet source to do that job for us. Now, before we do that, you may have noticed that I've taken off the other photographs that we had on here already. I'm just using this particular item, this patch, as an example of the process I'm about to describe. Once we're done dealing with the patch, we'll repopulate the image with all the photographs and show you the finished product. To remove that background, I want you to type those words into a Google search, remove background. And in the list, you should find a website for removing backgrounds for free. And this one is just titled Remove Background. You simply click on the upload image, select your item, and it will do that for you. And you see it's given you the picture of the patch, and you hit download, and now that will be saved to your download folder. Then go back to your drawing and use the import command to open that item from your downloads. Trace out the space that you want to put it in, and there it appears magically without any of that white background again. Now here we have the result of all the work we've done so far. I've got my blue rectangle with an orange border. I've arranged some photographs that tell a story, some pictures of airplanes, and then a couple of pictures of my dad. And I've added those squadron patches on each corner. Now I've also left some empty spaces. Those spaces are for some objects that I'm going to attach to the final printed photograph. In the top center, I'm going to include his brass eagle, which was on his cap, and then I'm going to include a piece of shrapnel or flak, which he recovered from his parachute in the bottom left, and in the center bottom I'm going to put his wings. Now you may also notice that there are captions added to many of the items, and I'm going to show you how to do that next by making the caption for that squadron patch that we just incorporated. Okay, so here we are back in CorelDraw, and you can see that I've added some captions to most of the items already. And I'd like you to notice something about the size and the color. You have to use obviously a color that contrasts with the background, so we're using white, and it's a common block font. It's Arial, but it's pretty small on the one that I made, and you have to be careful about that because when it's printed on a canvas texture like this one will be, anything smaller than let's say 10 point can be kind of hard to see. This is a 9 point, and I kind of wish I'd made it larger because by the time it got printed, a few of the words are a little fuzzy. Anyway, I select my text tool. In this case, it's printing in black by default, so I have to go back and change the color by selecting a fill color. Now with Corel, you can either do it over on the right side where all the colors are, or if you have already been using color on your document, you'll see the document colors down at the bottom. So I'm clicking on white, and now my print will be in white, and I actually typed the wrong thing. I'm going to have to strike that out and start typing again, because what we have here is the squadron patch for the 452nd Bomb Squadron. You know how you capitalize this is, of course, is your own taste. I'm sort of putting it in sentence form with only proper names capitalized. You know, keep in mind this is a 9 point on the actual print, and you might want to go a little larger than that. Depends upon how much you have to say. Okay, now I can move that around just by grabbing it with my cursor. You can left click on it, move it anywhere you want. You can also move it around in Corel by using your arrow keys, which is what I'm doing right now. And then you can change the amount that it moves with your arrow keys by clicking that little interval button up there where I'm moving the cursor right now. But I'm happy with where it is. Now we're left with the task of getting it printed. And here's where I ran into a little stumbling block. The service that I selected did a fairly good job, but they missed with the border, and you can see here that the border disappeared on the sides. I decided to go ahead and leave it as is. If it bothers me when it's installed and hanging on the wall, well then I might go ahead and have it done by another service. I have heard good things about this service, but I haven't tried them yet. Their prices are reasonable, and they offer a guarantee. The next step on my project was to cut some holes for the wings. These are going to be hidden by the wings. They look pretty bad right now, and I used a number 11 X-Acto blade for that. And then I also used a scribing tool to poke holes up at the top of the picture for the cap device. Here I'm using the pin on the back of the wings to hold them in place, and the cap device was held in by friction by the studs on the back. All that was left was to install that piece of flak but it had to be held on by some kind of adhesive, and we first tried a hot glue gun. That was my wife's suggestion, and it just didn't want to grip it very firmly, so I ended up installing it with some 5-minute epoxy. I'm very happy with how this has turned out so far. It's going to be the centerpiece of the shadow box display below my dad's burial flag, surrounded by the remaining few items that he brought back and kept over the years. This is the display unit disassembled. I've put the flag in and taken away the backboard for the shadow box portion. Now the backboard is a foam board with a sort of a velour surface on it so that you can stick pins into it, but several of the items that I'm going to include don't have pins, and I end up using Velcro for attachment. Now the observant among you may notice that the flag is folded crooked, but that was done by the honor guard that buried my father. The young sergeants that were folding this flag were very nervous, and I don't feel inclined to refold it just for the sake of symmetry. I have 2 of my father's medals to install on the display, and they both have a folding clasp pin on the back, as you can see here. The strip of Velcro that you can see below the medal will be for a plaque that I made that describes the medal and the conditions for which it was awarded. Here I'm cutting a slot for the pin on the air medal and inserting it. Friction holds it in place very nicely. And now I'm doing the same with his Distinguished Flying Cross. The other pieces of Velcro on here will hold his dog tags down in the lower left corner, and the one down at the bottom will be a descriptive plaque for the entire display. Here I'm attaching Velcro to the dog tags and those descriptive plaques I was mentioning. Regarding those plaques, when you have them made, if they are for a military medal, take some time to research the actual award description for each medal, because these things do change over the years and the decades. Both the Air Medal and the Distinguished Flying Cross have had changing criteria for being awarded, and the award criteria for the Distinguished Flying Cross changed several times just during World War II. So it's important to find out when the medal was awarded and pick the appropriate language. To get those plaques made, there are many services available on Amazon. This particular service was cheap. It's the one I used, but the shipping was a little bit slow. So, look around on Amazon. You might find one that guarantees faster shipping. Now that all those plaques and medals are in place, it's time to attach that canvas photo box that we assembled. And again, I'm using Velcro to hold it in place. Once it's fully assembled, I made a final inspection of the whole display, and I found there were a few things I wanted to correct. I discovered a little torn spot on the back of the canvas photo print, but I just used a Sharpie to darken it in and make it disappear. And of course I found lots of little pieces of lint all over that black velour, so here I'm using a piece of masking tape to pick them up. Once that was done, I quickly installed it inside the case before any more of that dust or the inevitable dog hair could make its appearance. And here it is, finally finished and hanging from the wall in our den. The wall itself was white and a little bit empty, so we found a print of my dad's airplane and had it framed and put it up above the display. But even that wasn't enough for my wife. She liked the idea so much that she decided she wanted one for my son's Eagle Scout awards. And once that one was in place, she suggested that we needed one for my military service to balance it out. And technically this wall isn't complete because we still have a son who is on active duty with the Army, but he doesn't want a display case made until he retires, so we've got a few years left to figure out how we're going to rearrange the wall when that happens. In closing this video, I'd like to offer my condolences if you're assembling a flag display box for a lost loved one. In aviation, we don't say a pilot has died or passed on. We say that they've flown west, forever pursuing the sun across the eternal blue. There is comfort and familiarity in that visualization for an aviator. If their lives aren't taken in combat or from other dire circumstance, they will often in their remaining days stare up at the sky and think back to their time spent flying. But they don't think of the dark times or the times of fear or sadness. Instead, they remember the glorious times when they chased that sun through golden clouds and peaceful blue skies. That's the image I have when I think of my dad, and when my time comes, I hope it's the way my family thinks of me. Thanks for watching.